I think the reason there's so many people in this room and the reason there are thousands of people online right now is everyone has a great sense, I think, that we are approaching an epic moment. Perhaps an epic struggle, the outcome of which will determine the fate of the country and perhaps the fate of the world and the fate of our future. And I think when we look at what happened in the election and the outcome and the impact it has on progressive people, and I think it's probably true for everyone who's in this room, there is a sense of great foreboding that the most right-wing element in the ruling class, the most dangerous force within the U.S. capitalist imperialist establishment, has taken the reins of power. And you might have said in 2016, Donald Trump is an anomaly. It's a weird sort of idiosyncratic development. Like who would have possibly expected Donald Trump to become president of the United States? But here we are 8 years later, and not only did Trump win, Trump won the popular vote. He not only won the Electoral College, he won the popular vote. And it wasn't just Trump. The Republicans took the Senate. They have the House of Representatives. They have a unified government under the leadership of the Republican Party, which is now Donald Trump's party. So you cannot say at this point in 2024 that we've encountered some freakish, weird anomaly. That's not true. And I think that we have to deeply appreciate what's happened. Now, it's not that Donald Trump's electoral vote, his popular vote, went up from 2020. It's about the same. It's about 74 million or so. In the 2020 election, Joe Biden got 81 million votes. Donald Trump has won the popular vote by a significant margin because the votes for the Democratic Party candidate have gone down by about 14 million. That's a profound difference. So when we talk about the fact that the Democratic Party has nobody to blame but itself, that's on the surface level obviously true. When Biden came into office in 2020, and let's face it, the only reason people voted for Joe Biden was that his name was not Donald Trump. Nobody could look at Joe Biden and say, yeah, that's the guy I want to lead the country. That's not what motivated people. It's that he was not Donald Trump. That was his sole calling card. But he not only won the White House with a very significant margin, 7 million more votes than Trump, but the Democrats had the House of Representatives and they had the Senate. They could do, in fact, whatever they wanted to do because they controlled both branches of the legislative part of the government and the White House, the executive branch. They could do whatever they wanted to do. So let's assume they did do whatever they wanted to do. What did they do? They provoked a war, an unnecessary war with Russia that's taking place in Ukraine. They carried out the genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Netanyahu didn't make them do it. He didn't make them send 2,000-pound bombs that the Biden-Harris Blinken administration knew were being dropped on tent cities, dropped on people as they lined up for food. Netanyahu didn't make them do it. They wanted to do it. They did it because they want Israel to win the war against the resistance in the Middle East. That was their decision. They said they were going to provide economic relief for working class people. Well, what did Biden-Harris do? They withdrew the COVID relief programs like the $300 per child, per family that started during COVID. Now, according to the U.S. government's own statistics, that one decision to send $300 per child into each family reduced childhood poverty in the United States by 50% in a year. 1 out of 5 children lives in poverty, and the poverty numbers are ridiculous. You could triple the poverty level numbers and you'd still be in poverty. So they withdrew this program and they doubled childhood poverty. That meant it was a policy choice to make kids poor, to make it hard for them to eat. They didn't have to do it. They did it because they wanted to do it. Nobody made them do it. They ended the moratorium on evictions. Nobody made them do it. The only person from the whole U.S. Congress, 435 members of these opportunist politicians who could have stood up and said something about the moratorium on evictions, only Cori Bush. Only Cori Bush stood up, and she did a hunger strike at the Capitol building by herself, and some of us who joined her. And they took away the moratorium on evictions, and there was a flood of evictions. They could do whatever they wanted to do. You know, when Donald Trump was president, and George Floyd was killed, on May 25th, 2020, Minneapolis went into rebellion. Tim Walz was the governor of Minnesota. On June 1st, you'll all remember that sort of moment where Donald Trump came across Lafayette Park. They violently dispersed those of us who were out in the streets, and I say we collectively were out in the streets during those days. They pepper sprayed people. They used so-called non-lethal or less than lethal weapons so that Trump could go across Lafayette Park and stand in front of St. John's Church and hold the Bible. That was right after a conference call with the governors, including Tim Walz, and Trump praised Tim Walz for doing what Trump insisted should be done, which is to use maximum force against people protesting against the murder of George Floyd. That was an audio tape that the Democrats were proud of 1 month ago when it was released, because they said, Donald Trump says that Tim Walz is a far-left communist, but this proves that Tim Walz is not, because Donald Trump was praising him for using police violence against protesters in Minneapolis the 5 days after George Floyd was killed. The Democrats were proud of it. So what happened after Trump had this conference call and told all the governors who were nodding and going along, let's make the cities of America the new battlefield? He said, we're going to dominate the battlefield. And the battlefield was the cities and towns of the United States, and he wanted to invoke the Insurrection Act. We all know this because we were all of us are old enough, I think, to know that that's what actually happened 4 years ago. And what happened when Trump did that? 35 million people in the United States went into the streets in the biggest nationwide uprising against racism in American history. The Democrats were going along with Trump, including Muriel Bowser in D.C., a Democratic mayor. They were imposing the curfews. They were sending the cops against the people. But the people, instead of being afraid, people were afraid at first. When you were getting hit with tear gas after tear gas after tear gas, people ran. And then they started running a little more slowly. And then they started picking up the tear gas and throwing it back at the pigs. They got braver and braver. That's what happened. And that was a rebellion led by black working class young people. That's who led that nationwide rebellion. And there were white people there and Latino people and Asian people and Arab Americans. It was a massive rainbow coalition of resistance led really by a section of the African American working class community that took matters into their own hands. That's what actually happened. And then you could see, like, The Pentagon started renaming military bases. They started taking down statues. The NFL, the billionaire, said, yeah, let's all take a knee. Like all of these reactionary racists, moribund racists were like, no, we're with the movement. What changed was not the Democrats. It was the uprising of the people. Like, let's learn this lesson. Right now, I think a lot of people are, one, demoralized and scared and fearing that we've entered into a new political realignment because Trump won the popular vote, didn't sneak in, and the Republicans control both houses. Well, people have a right to be nervous. They have a right to be scared. If you're listening to our brothers and sisters from the immigrant communities who say that they're scared, well, of course they're scared. Trump is promising to destroy their communities and their families. This is an epic moment. There is a political realignment going on. It's consummated. This election consummates it. Just like Reagan was a political realignment in the country, the election of Reagan. Reagan's election was, in a way, the end of the 1960s, an end of the progressive era, the beginning of the fight back by the bourgeoisie that said, we're going to stop the communist winning streak, we're going to roll back civil rights, we're going to roll back women's rights, we're going to push gay people back into the closet. That was the Reagan era. And it was a political realignment. Kamala Harris ran in 2024 as a Reagan Democrat. I mean, she was on the podium with Liz Cheney. 20 years ago, all the Democrats said, Dick Cheney, he's the worst monster in the world. Only second place to George W. Bush. Now the Democrats and Kamala Harris are campaigning with Dick Cheney, with Liz Cheney. George W. Bush, because his name is not Donald Trump, his approval ratings among Democrats has gone to 54%. The Democrats have adopted the party of Reagan. In fact, they criticized Trump for taking the Republicans away from being the party of Reagan. So, guess what? The people in the United States do not look at a Reagan Democratic Party as a genuine alternative to the ultra-rightism of Donald Trump. That's not an alternative. So what are we going to do? Our slogan says, what is to be done? Of course, that's from Lenin. And Lenin was, what is to be done meant, let's build an organization. Let's build a party or parties. Let's get organized. The what is to be done was written in 1902, and it was helping the working class and the poor in Russia to get organized. In that sense, that's what we should be doing. But there's another side to the question of what is to be done. And that is, what is to not be done? What do we don't want to do? What don't we want to do? What is not to be done? I would say let's learn the lesson of the first Trump administration. When Trump came into office, so many people went to the airports because he said we're going to ban Muslims from coming into the country. Massive protests. On Inauguration Day, we outnumbered Trump supporters. There were so many protests. This was the anti-Trump resistance. But what happened? The Democratic Party completely co-opted that movement, completely took over that movement, because they said, you have to resist Trump, the person, which meant the best and practical way to do it is to get rid of Trump by electing the Democrats. And this very profound activist movement that began as soon as Trump was elected in 2016 simply became a spectator sport where people were cheering on the Democratic Party as it tried to impeach Trump, tried to do lobbying, used all of its nonprofit organizations with single-issue protests, which were completely meaningless. So all of this activism in resistance ended up as being simply a tail to the kite of the Democratic Party. And as we've said, as all of the speakers have said, the problem isn't just Trump. The problem is the capitalist system. And the ruling class parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, are not in opposition to capitalism. They are the voice of capitalism. We get a choice every 2 or 4 years to vote for a variety of carefully vetted imperialist politicians and think that that's democracy. You get to vote every 2 or 4 years for who's going to oppress you for the next 2 or 4 years. That's the beauty of American democracy, is there's this variety. Well, it's not enough. You're not going to win over working class people. North Carolina voted for Trump. Well, go to Asheville, North Carolina. So many families have been destroyed by Hurricane Helene and then Milton. So many people are living, they don't have flood insurance, they don't have wind insurance, they can't rebuild their homes. What did the Biden-Harris administration actually do for them? Nothing. Instead, it sent 2,000-pound bombs to destroy the people in Gaza. Sent $60 billion for nonstop war against Russia, using Ukrainians as just part of a meat grinder war. Like the people in North Carolina, when they hear Biden and Harris say, oh, Trump is going to undermine NATO, the people in Asheville, North Carolina, who cannot put their homes back together again, don't care about that. That's not appealing. This imperialist messaging from the Democrats completely antagonizes and alienates big sections of the proletariat, big sections of the working class, big sections of young people. That's why there's 14 million fewer votes for the Democrats this time than there was in 2020. It's not because the country has become so right-wing. The political realignment is not because the masses of people have become revanchist, reactionary, terrible, racist, misogynist pigs. Many are, but that's not the majority. That's not the real problem. The problem is the ruling class has become so far right. The ruling class has become so far right. And their real goal, and Trump's real goal, and the Democrats won't tell the truth about this, is Trump and the billionaires who are coming in intend to roll back every gain from the 60s, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and before that, the labor movement. They want to carry out a counter-revolution and go back to naked, pure capitalism, where only capital matters, where only profit matters, and they want to get rid of all of these reforms. They never wanted them in the first place, and now they think that they can do it. The Democrats are not going to stand up and fight. So we're in an epic battle, brothers and sisters. It's epic. What happens now, what we do now, will make all the difference. If Trump goes unopposed, if the Trump program goes through, if the civil rights movement reforms are rolled back, if regulations that are trying to mitigate climate catastrophe are ended, and that's their goal, if they're going to put people, gay people, women, trans people into a closet, demonize them, criminalize them, if we do nothing, that's what's going to happen. It's that simple. Let's not pretend this isn't serious. This is very serious. We either fight and fight effectively and win, or this is going to be a terrible counter-revolutionary assault against the people. We have to be serious, not glib. We have to be super serious, but we cannot simply be activists. We learned the lesson of 2016. If you're just an activist, you just want to be against Trump, you just want to protest against Trump, you're going to end up as a tail to the kite of the Democratic Party. So we have to build organizations everywhere, in every city, every town, like the immigrant sisters and brothers are doing, committees. I'm in the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Thousands of people have applied to join our party in the last 3 days. I'm literally thousands. But, and we want thousands more to join. But my point is, people are looking for organization now. They might look to PSL, but they're going to look to other organizations. We have December 12th comrades here. We have Damian here. We have so many people's organizations. You don't have to wait for somebody to call you and say, do you want to join a group? Form an organization. You can do it in every, like Eugene said, you know, undocumented friends, form a group, form a collective. We can build this movement if all of us become self-acting people. And if we understand that we're not simply going to be activists, we're going to be in the streets and organizing, but we're going to provide a political program that can reach the people in Asheville, North Carolina. We're going to get a political program that can reach the people in the inner cities around the country. We're going to have a political program that can go to all of the so-called Rust Belt cities that have been hollowed out and decimated by the policies of the Republicans and the Democrats. We have to have a program to reach the masses. We can't stop the ruling class, but the organized people can stop the ruling class. That's our job. Thank you, everyone.